Their whispers on the wind, skeletal remains silhouetted against a vast, empty sky. They're the ghosts of the American dream. And I don't mean specters or spirits. I mean something much more real and, honestly, a lot more chilling. Entire towns, once home to thousands of people, now just gone, silent, abandoned, and literally erased from our modern maps. These weren't just a few lonely buildings. These were living communities with schools, churches, bustling main streets, and homes filled with families. They were born from a flash of hope and built on the promise of a prosperous future. But for them, that promise was broken. So what happened? What could possibly make thousands of people just get up and walk away from their homes, their history, everything? This isn't just one story. It's a pattern, a series of invisible forces that built America and then, almost overnight, unbuilt it. We're going to uncover the untold stories of economic disaster, of catastrophic miscalculations, and the unstoppable power of nature and progress that wiped these places off the face of the earth. This is the story of why entire American towns vanished. Imagine a town of 10,000 people, a wild, untamed place with over 2,000 buildings, dozens of saloons, and a staggering amount of gold and silver pouring out of the ground. That was Bodie, California. Today, the population is zero. Or picture this, a quiet little community of over 1,000 people, nestled in the heart of Pennsylvania. Today, it's a modern ghost town with fewer than 5 residents, where the very ground beneath their feet is on fire, seeping poisonous gas into the air. These aren't ancient ruins. The seeds of their destruction were planted by the very things that gave them life. Their stories are a chilling warning of just how fast prosperity can turn to dust, and how the foundations of our own world might be a lot more fragile than we think. Deep at the heart of America's ghost town problem, there's a simple, seductive, and totally fatal flaw: building your whole world on one thing. The vast majority of these lost communities were boomtowns. They exploded into existence for one reason, and one reason only: to pull something valuable out of the ground. It was a fever dream, a massive gamble that drew people from all over with the promise of getting rich quick. Take Bodie, California. In 1859, a prospector stumbled upon gold in the hills east of the Sierra Nevada. For almost 20 years, it was a slow burn. But then, in 1876, a massive deposit was hit, and the rush was on. In just a few years, the town's population exploded to almost 10,000 people. Bodie was the Wild West incarnate. It was a place of insane extremes, opulent mansions and brutal lawlessness side by side. The town had over 60 saloons, gambling dens, and a reputation so fierce that people would actually ask, "Have we a man for breakfast?" A grim joke about who got killed the night before. For a little while, the money flowed like a river. The mines around Bodie pulled out over $35 million in gold and silver, a mind-boggling amount for the time. The town was a hub of the future, one of the first in California to get electricity. It had its own newspapers, a fire department, even a thriving Chinatown full of people hoping for their own piece of the dream. It must have seemed like the party would never end. But the whole thing was built on a clock that was ticking down. Bodie's fall was just as fast as its rise. By the 1880s, the mines were giving up less and less gold. The easy money was gone. Soon, it cost more to get the gold out than the gold was actually worth. Then came the nationwide panic of 1893, another devastating blow. So, people started leaving, chasing the next rumor of a big strike in some other town. The population vanished, shops closed up, and the once rowdy streets fell silent. By the 1940s, Bodie was almost completely empty. The final nail in the coffin came in 1942, when mining officially stopped for good. What makes Bodie so haunting is what they left behind. It's so remote that when people left, they just took what they could carry. They left houses with pantries full of food, stores with merchandise still on the shelves, a schoolhouse with lessons still on the blackboard. Today, Bodie is preserved in a state of arrested decay, a ghost town literally frozen in time. It's a perfect, stark monument to the boom and bust cycle that built and broke so much of the American West. And this same story played out all over the country. In states like New Mexico, Colorado, and Montana, towns with names like St. Elmo and Bannack blew up around gold, silver, and copper, only to wither and die when the veins ran dry. The very thing that created them, that singular focus, was their death sentence. They had no other industry, no farming, no other reason to exist. The people who came there with big dreams were practical. When the money left, so did they, leaving the hollowed-out shells of their communities as a warning about just how quickly fortune can fade. Isn't it ironic that the one thing that symbolizes American freedom, the open road, could also be what kills a town? For a huge part of the 20th century, whole communities owed their lives not to a gold mine, but to a simple ribbon of asphalt. But when that lifeline gets cut, the town bleeds out, slowly and silently. The story of Route 66 is the perfect, tragic example. Commissioned in 1926, the Mother Road was a vital artery stretching from Chicago to LA, carrying migrants, tourists, and money. An entire ecosystem of towns popped up along the way, built specifically to cater to that endless stream of cars. Motels with flashy neon, quirky diners, gas stations, souvenir shops. This was the lifeblood of places like Cuervo, New Mexico, and Two Guns, Arizona. Cuervo, New Mexico, was once a busy little stop. It had stores, hotels, and gas stations, all making a living off the highway traffic. Its population peaked in the 1940s, a small but solid community built on the promise of the road. But in the late 1950s, America had a new dream, the interstate highway system. These were massive, multi-lane highways designed for pure speed and efficiency. They were marvels of engineering, and they were a death sentence for the towns on the old roads. When Interstate 40 was built, it bypassed Cuervo completely. That river of cars, customers, and cash was just diverted. The effect wasn't instant, like a mine shutting down. It was a slow, agonizing death. Businesses closed one by one. Families had to move away to find work. The once lively streets just went quiet. Today, Cuervo is a ghost town, its crumbling buildings easily visible from the interstate that killed it. It's a haunting reminder of what happens when progress decides you're in the way. It's the same story all along that old road. Take Glen Rio, a town that straddles the border of Texas and New Mexico. It thrived because of its unique spot. Travelers could buy cheap gas in Texas, then sleep in a motel on the New Mexico side. When I-40 bypassed it, the town's entire reason to exist disappeared overnight. Now, it's just abandoned buildings, whispering stories of a time gone by. This same fate hit countless towns that depended on railroads. In the 19th century, getting a rail line was the difference between life and death for a community. Towns would pop up as temporary hubs to support the railroad's westward push. But the railroad was always moving, always pushing forward. When the tracks were extended, the hub would move with it, and the old town was often left for dead almost overnight. These towns weren't destroyed by a natural disaster or a depleted resource. Their resource was the flow of people. The highway, the railroad, these were the arteries pumping life into them. When a newer, bigger, more efficient artery was built, the old one was just left to shrivel up. It's a quieter death than a mine explosion, but the result is the same. A community erased, a place where the American dream took a detour and never looked back. The stories of these towns are carved into the American landscape. They're a huge part of our history that most people just drive right past. We are dedicated to bringing these forgotten stories to light. If you think this stuff is as fascinating as we do, please consider hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications. It genuinely helps us keep investigating and sharing these important pieces of our past. And let us know in the comments, which of these ghost towns fascinates you the most? Or is there a forgotten town in your area you think we should check out next? Sometimes, a town dies not because the money dries up or the highway moves on. Sometimes, the very ground it's built on turns against it, unleashing a slow-motion disaster that makes life flat out impossible. There is no more terrifying and, frankly, more bizarre example of this than Centralia, Pennsylvania. Back in the early 1960s, Centralia was a pretty normal, stable town in Pennsylvania's coal region. It had about 1,100 people, a tight-knit community whose whole life was tied to the coal mines that honeycombed the ground right under their feet. But in May of 1962, something happened that seemed like no big deal at the time, but it started a catastrophe that is still going on today. The most common story is that volunteer firefighters were trying to clean up the town landfill before Memorial Day. They set a pile of trash on fire, a normal practice back then. But this landfill was inside an old, abandoned strip mine pit, and an exposed vein of pure anthracite coal was right there. The fire ignited the coal seam. Despite their best efforts, the fire spread, slipping down into the massive, dark labyrinth of abandoned mine tunnels that ran beneath the entire town. For years, the fire was this invisible menace. Nobody could really grasp how big the problem was. Early attempts to put it out failed because of a lack of funding and a total misunderstanding of the scale of the fire. But by the late 70s and early 80s, the consequences became terrifyingly real. The ground started heating up. Steam and poisonous gases, including deadly levels of carbon monoxide, began hissing from cracks in the earth. The ground itself became unstable. In 1981, a 12-year-old boy was nearly killed when a sinkhole, 80 feet deep, suddenly opened up under his feet in his own backyard. The town had become a death trap. Living in Centralia was a daily roll of the dice with invisible toxic fumes and the constant threat of the ground swallowing you whole. The federal government finally had to step in. In 1983, Congress set aside over $40 million to relocate the residents. It was basically an admission of defeat. The fire was too big, too deep, and way too expensive to ever put out. They just decided to let it burn. Most residents took the buyout. Their homes were demolished, and all that was left was an empty grid of streets. Today, Centralia is a modern ghost town. Fewer than 5 people still live there, holdouts in a toxic, steaming landscape. Smoke still seeps from giant cracks in the buckled, abandoned highway that once ran through town. That fire under Centralia is still burning, and scientists think it could keep burning for another 250 years. The town wasn't just abandoned, it was eaten from below by the very resource that created it. Now, Centralia is an insane story, but it's not the only time the Earth itself has kicked a town off the map. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s was a man-made environmental disaster caused by years of bad farming practices and a massive drought. It wiped countless small farming towns off the map all across the Great Plains. In other places, a town's own industry poisoned it. Picture Oklahoma, used to be a national leader in lead and zinc mining. But decades of mining left behind giant, toxic mountains of waste and polluted the groundwater. The land was so contaminated, and the risk of the ground collapsing into old mine shafts so high that the government declared it a Superfund site and forced everyone to leave. These stories are a grim look at what happens when we ignore the environment. Whether it's a slow-burning fire, the fury of a dust storm, or the toxic legacy of industry, these towns simply became unlivable. They are a powerful, unsettling reminder that a community is only as stable as the ground it's built on. And when that ground becomes the enemy, sometimes the only choice is to run. Not all ghost towns are accidents of fate. Some were perfectly healthy, thriving communities that were deliberately wiped out by an act of the U.S. government. Their death wasn't an accident, it was a plan. These towns were sacrificed for what was seen as progress. Their homes and histories drowned under massive new lakes or cleared out to make way for national parks. Throughout the 20th century, America went on a dam-building spree to provide water and electricity to its growing cities. But to build a giant dam and create a reservoir, you need a lot of land, and often, that land wasn't empty. Whole towns found themselves standing in the way, destined to be put underwater. One of those places was Butler, Tennessee. Tucked in a valley, the town had always had trouble with flooding, but it was a living community, the only incorporated town in the area. Then, in the 1940s, the Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA, started building the Watauga Dam to modernize the rural South. The project created Watauga Lake, and the town of Butler was right in the flood zone. The residents faced a heartbreaking reality. Their town was going to be destroyed. The government bought their property, and the slow, sad process of dismantling their lives began. In a huge effort, about 175 buildings were physically moved to higher ground. Residents were even given the choice to dig up the graves of their loved ones from the town cemetery, to move them so they wouldn't be submerged forever. The new settlement was fittingly called New Butler. By 1948, the dam was finished, the valley was flooded, and Old Butler vanished beneath the waves. For decades, it was just a memory, an underwater ghost. Then, in a remarkable event in 1983, the lake was drained for dam maintenance, and the ghostly foundations of Old Butler reappeared, a haunting glimpse of a lost world. This exact story happened all over the country. In California, the Shasta Dam created Shasta Lake, drowning several towns, including Kennett, once home to the biggest copper smelter on the West Coast. In New York, creating the Ashokan Reservoir to supply water to New York City meant flooding a dozen towns and moving 2,000 people. A different kind of government action erased other communities. Creating America's beautiful national parks sometimes came at the cost of the people who already lived there. Elkmont, Tennessee, is a perfect, bittersweet example. It started as a logging town in the early 1900s, right in the middle of what would become the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It quickly turned into a popular vacation spot for wealthy families from Knoxville, who built a private clubhouse and charming cabins. When the park was established in 1934, the land Elkmont was on was folded into it. The cabin owners were given a choice: sell their homes for full price and leave right away, or sell them to the Park Service for a discount in exchange for a lifetime lease. Many chose the leases, and for decades Elkmont existed as this weirdly private little community inside a public park. But those leases had an expiration date. Most of them ran out in 1992, and the National Park Service, not wanting to maintain dozens of old, decaying buildings, refused to renew them. The last residents left, and the town was abandoned to the forest. For years, the cabins and the old Wonderland Hotel crumbled, creating an eerie ghost town that drew in curious explorers. After a long debate, a compromise was reached in 2009. The Park Service would restore 19 of the most important buildings and let nature reclaim the rest. The stories of places like Butler and Elkmont are complicated. Their removal served a public good, providing power or preserving nature. But for the people who called these places home, it was the end of their world. They weren't erased by failure, but by force, a deliberate decision that their community was expendable for a larger national goal. Their stories are a sober reminder that the march of progress can leave deep, permanent scars on the landscape and in the lives of those who are standing in its path. So, what do we take away from all this? From the gold-crazed hills of California to the burning ground of Pennsylvania, from the bypassed backroads of Route 66 to the drowned valleys of Tennessee, the ghosts of America's lost towns all tell one powerful story. It isn't just a story of failure. It's a story about the very nature of American ambition. It's about a nation built on relentless, forward motion, a culture of boom and bust, where fortunes are made and lost, and where progress itself is often a destructive force. The reasons are different, but they all weave together, betting it all on a single resource that runs out, building a whole economy around a road, only for a bigger, faster road to make yours obsolete, pushing the environment to a breaking point where it finally pushes back, or simply being in the way when the government decides it needs your land for something else. These towns were once packed with people chasing a dream, raising families, building a life. Now, they are silent witnesses. Their decaying buildings and empty streets are more than just creepy tourist spots. They are classrooms of history, teaching us about the cycles of hope and hardship that have always defined this country. They hold up a mirror, showing us the fragility of our own communities. To walk the dead silent streets of Bodie, or to see the smoke still rising from the cracked earth of Centralia, is to feel the incredible weight of what's been lost. It's to understand that the map of a nation is never finished. It's always being redrawn, not just with new cities and new highways, but with the quiet and sometimes brutal erasure of the places left behind. These towns may be gone from the map, but their stories, their warnings, and their ghosts are here to stay.